Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. It's morning here anyway, so it may not be where you are right now. But yeah, I just finished up some breakfast and I thought that we would dive into another video today. So yesterday we watched a video about India, and that was kind of my introduction to Asian history. And so I thought I would try to kind of go to a different country today. I have the idea of kind of taking some of the major countries in Asia and kind of watching a general overview of their history, and then hoping that some of the stuff that we learn about in each video or whatever kind of starts to overlap a little bit. I found that when I'm learning something new, approaching it from a bunch of different resources, and then you see a lot of the overlap within those different resources, and it kind of like sticks in your head better that way. So I'm kind of going to take the same approach with this. And today we're going to look at China. China is usually the country that I think about when I think of Asia. Like, my brain goes to China first, which probably makes sense because it is the largest country in Asia. I think it's got the most population in the entire world. But I don't know anything about it. The only thing I know about China is that like a decade ago I watched I think it was a BBC documentary about Chinese school, which was really eye-opening for me because I had no idea what school was like in Asia. And since then I've kind of seen it in Korea as well, Japan I think also, and they all are kind of alike, where they just go to school for these really long hours every day. And education is extremely important in these different countries as far as like finding a job and then kind of setting your path in life. Again, very different from what we're used to in the West. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to learning about China because, like I said, I don't know anything about it. And hopefully this video is good. I think it's from a channel called I can't pronounce it. Subinhi or something like that. I forgot. It kind of looks like a sort of like the oversimplified style, but I'm not sure if that's going to be what it is or not. But we're going to take a look at it. Again, this is just a very quick overview of it. This is part 1. There is a part 2 that we'll do it tomorrow. So we'll come back to this. I don't know. Let's just get started.
This episode is made possible by Audible. Go to audible.com/Sweeney or text Sweeney to 500 500 to get started with a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial. Nuwa and Fuxi, usually depicted as half-human, half-dragon spirit creatures, created humans out of clay as companions. The humans settled in the Yellow River and were ruled by the 5 good emperors, mythological figures who were peaceful and benevolent. But tragedy struck when the river flooded, devastating the land. Yu the engineer spent 13 long years building canals and locks to control the waters, earning his place as the land's king. He founded the Shah Dynasty, China's first ruling family.
I've heard of the Shah Dynasty before. So this is interesting with the different mythological figures. So half dragon, half human. I forgot what their names were, but they created the humans out of clay. I feel like every culture seems to have this kind of mythological origin story. But I'm curious, in China, how are you kind of taught this? Is it taught as a mythological story, or is it taught more as like history? Or are you taught it at all? So, but yeah, it's interesting.
And a structure of government that would remain unchanged for millennia.
Okay, I thought we were about to get in a Western invasion of China or something, but this is just the intro song.
In the words of John Green,
an open letter to the Shah Dynasty. Dear Shah Dynasty, why you gotta be so fictional?
yeah, the Shah Dynasty is largely considered mythological at this point, but may be intertwined with some real events, considering how much the later Chinese scholars wrote about them.
Okay, well that kind of answers my question then, about the mythology. It seems like it's kind of like the Homer deal with Greece. Like they have the Iliad and the Odyssey. They're kind of treated as mythological, but also somewhat historical. Also kind of like the Bible as well, like Israel and Christianity and stuff. Some of the stuff is treated as historical and some of it's not. So again, we're seeing this pattern, right, among all of the different cultures. It just goes to show that even though there are a lot of differences in the cultures, there are a lot of similarities as well. We all have kind of these similar things with origin stories and mythology and history. And yeah.
Speaking of writing, the Chinese were really, really good at it. They developed their own famous pictograph-based system concurrently without any outside influences. But they...
Now, this is something I also really, really love about Asian culture is the writing, because it's pictures, basically, which I think is so cool. It's so different from what we have over here, where it's just, regular old letters. Now, do you guys use... I guess you wouldn't use letters, so I'm not really sure how the language works. Because right here we see it says... I'm not sure how you pronounce that. It is XIA. So... would you write that just for English or non-Chinese/Mandarin speakers? So in China, you wouldn't actually see the XIA. It would just be the pictograph, right? And what do you call that? Because I know in Japan, they call them kanji, right? So is there another name for it in China as well? But yeah, I think it's so cool because like it kind of like each symbol kind of tells a story in and of itself, which is awesome. I would love to kind of learn how to read Chinese or Japanese or something like that. So, but it'd be interesting to see what the difference is between the Chinese method of writing versus the Japanese. I'm assuming the Koreans have their own as well. That's interesting that they all adopted this pictograph style of writing, but it's just still a little different between each country.
It looked a lot more like this than this. In any case, humans settled in the Yellow River Valley, forming numerous cultures which is collectively called the Yellow River Civilization. The myth of Yu the Engineer likely began with this early civilization's attempts to control the flooding of the river. These settlers are what we now call the Han, although they didn't refer to themselves as that for at least a few centuries.
I've heard of the Han before. I've heard of the Yellow River before. Is the Yellow River the northern border of China? I'm not sure where the borders are here with all of this. Also, the river flooding is something I hear a lot about in China as well. So apparently, it looks like there are a lot of rivers, like long rivers and stuff. It'd be fun to kind of learn about those, I think.
They were surrounded by numerous other peoples.
Sorry, I brushed my Bluetooth headphones and it started playing the video again. What was I gonna say? I lost my train of thought. But the borders right here. So that Yellow River across the top, is that the northern border of China with it would be Mongolia, right? Or does some of it also border Russia? I'm not sure how the geography works exactly with that.
To their south, north, and west. The first Chinese state to be supported by historical evidence is the Shang. The story goes that the Shang were one of the member states of the Shah Dynasty and rose up to overthrow the last Shah emperor under their leader King Tang. Tang defeated the forces of the Shah during a storm at the Battle of Mingtao. The storm was seen as a sign that the spirits were blessing his overthrow of the dynasty.
I feel like I've heard all of these names before. I don't know if it's just from pop culture, seeing Chinese stuff in pop culture, like Shang, Mingtao, Shah. All of this stuff is stuff I've heard before somewhere. I don't know where.
In 1046 BC, the Shang were overthrown by the Zhao, which is China's longest-lasting dynasty. It is speculated that the name for China in the Mandarin language comes from this period. The Zhao ruled the kingdom under a quasi-feudal system, meaning that power was given to regional warlords, all of whom pledged fealty to the king. This means that the
Feudalism,
king's power depends
again.
on keeping the lords happy, which King Yu did not. He exiled his wife, whom he had married for political reasons, and the state she came from rose up in revolt. They deposed the king and installed his son Ping to the throne, but merely as a figurehead with no real authority, as regional warlords began crowning themselves kings over their own states. Chroniclers refer to this time as the period of spring and autumn. It doesn't translate well into English. Soon a
Okay, so if you look at this map right here, China is very small. I'm assuming this is what China is at this point. We're way in BC era. Feudalism is a thing. Feudalism is a thing in a lot of countries, I feel like. So, again, we're just seeing these patterns play out across cultures. You know, again, it's just like that idea of we think cultures are so different, and yet we see all of these similarities in them. It's just like history repeats itself across, it seems like almost all cultures. It's just humans. It's human nature. We're all the same, really.
A rivalry would emerge among these states for control of all China, beginning the Warring States period, and a collapse of any centralized control. Warring became so fierce, in fact, that the local kings began building compacted earth fortifications on their mutual borders to deter invasions from rival states. Fighting ended in 221 BC when the Qin finally defeated the rest and unified China once more. The Qin dynasty didn't last very
I feel like China's starting to get a little bit bigger there. So are all of those walls like precursors to the Great Wall? Seems like that's a kind of a major strategy in Chinese military, is to build these fortified walls to protect themselves.
very long, but they did have absolute authority. Agriculture and herding were regulated and everyone paid their taxes, but they did have a weird fear of books for some reason. The teachings of Confucius became very popular and
They had books in 213 BC. I thought books were like a thing in the 1500s after the printing press was invented. Is this like a different kind of book? Not really in the form that we think of now. Maybe it was like a different ancient book.
his brand of philosophy began having huge impacts on Chinese society. In response to the growing power of the Xiongnu, the ancestors of the Mongols, Emperor Qin Shi Huang began joining parts of the warring states' walls at strategic weak points in the border. This would be the first foundations of China's Great Wall. The walls continued to be expanded upon using hundreds and thousands of slave laborers and soldiers over successive centuries to protect the empire from various other nomadic raiders.
For this stuff.
Qin Shi Huang became deranged and senile in his old age.
So I guess the Great Wall goes across the border of Mongolia and China. I've never paid attention to the geography of that, but okay. So that was built way back in the day. Like way back. Man, that's been around for a while.
And became obsessed with finding a cure for death to allow him to attain immortality. He traveled far and wide and spent a small fortune on alchemy, medicines, and potions.
Yeah, good luck
one
with
of which
that.
killed him.
Yeah.
The succession of the emperor caused a crisis when the nobles attempted to crown his son and control him as a puppet, causing the country to erupt into a civil war between rival states. The Han state was victorious, which began the rule of the Han Dynasty,
Here we go again.
famous for inventing paper,
I've heard
which
of
is
this.
apparently what people used to write things on.
Heard of the Han Dynasty. So they invented paper after they started like banning books. That seems backwards to me. Not really sure what the deal is with that.
During the Unification War, the rulers of the Yu state fled to the south in exile, where they set up their own kingdoms, the Nanyu and the Minyu, stretching all the way to modern
So they're
Vietnam.
They're
The
expanding
Han
their
began a
territory.
period of aggressive foreign policy under Emperor Wu, conquering both the Yu kingdoms in the south and going to war with the Xiongnu Confederation in the north, annexing vast amounts of the ethnic Turkic Tarim Basin. This extremely rapid expansion into Central Asia gave China its first contacts with the numerous nomadic tribes of the inner steppes, attracting many merchants to the lucrative corridor between east and west. It was the beginning of the Silk Road. It was during the Han that China experienced its golden age. Great strides were made in developing art, culture, and science that would come to shape almost everything we know about Oriental culture today. A new religion making its way down the Silk Road began taking its own shape in the southwest. It is known
Buddhism.
to us as Buddhism.
Yeah. I was just noticing the years kind of ticking by really quickly in the top corner. So all of this would have been happening kind of around the time of Jesus Christ in the Middle East. Again, they said Central Asia. I don't know. So I'm assuming like Western China is considered like Central Asia. And if that's the case, then I think that kind of lines up with India. So would India be considered Central Asia? Again, these are terms that we don't use here in the United States, at least not what I was taught. To us, it's just all Asia. Or the Middle East. It's like the Middle East and then Asia. So yeah, so the Silk Road, does that mean that they were trading silk? Is that kind of why it's called the Silk Road? I'm guessing India was trading with China at this point as well. And we're also seeing China expand westward more. Again, this is like a parallel with the United States. The United States kind of started like China on the eastern part of the continent and then started expanding west. So I'm seeing, again, some parallels here. And Buddhism came into China. So is that like kind of the main religion there? Is Buddhism?
In the year 9, the Han Dynasty was briefly interrupted by a usurper named Wang Mang, who seized power from the Han in an attempt to establish his own dynasty, and he would have been successful were it not for his reforms to distribute land equally among the populace. He lost his territories in the west and was deposed by a mob after only 13 years of rule.
It's crazy.
I guess nobody told him it was way too early for China's communist revolution. The Han eventually defeated the Xiongnu after generations of fighting and expanded their trade with the west. They eventually split into 3 rival kingdoms in 222 and briefly reunited under the Jin dynasty in 280, but the northern section rebelled against their rule by the so-called 5 barbarians, which the southerners called the 16 kingdoms.
Interesting. This reminds me of Israel. How Israel was kind of divided at one point between the north and the south, and they had the different kingdoms in each. Also, the United States was divided between north and south. There's a Northern Ireland, and I think the UK also kind of have like a friendly rivalry between the north and the south. Again, we're seeing these patterns, right, across multiple countries and cultures.
But both the south and the north were unstable and changed ruling families too many times to name. The Sui came to power as successors to the Zhao state and unified China again in 589, while the Gokturks rose to power in the central steppes.
Heard of the
Tang
Gokturks.
succeeded the Sui and expanded the empire.
Did they? So I saw them coming in from the west. Gokturks. Are those like Turkish descent? I don't know. I'm just guessing from the name.
They subjugated the Gokturks in the north, conquered the Koreans in Goryeo, and solidified their iron hold in Southwest Asia. Tang China spread its influence over all the rest of Asia in China's second golden age. They were famous for introducing land reforms called the Phubing System, which is again a flirtatious experiment with communism. I can see where this is going. The reforms were albeit successful, and the economic boom allowed for the budget of a standing army. If you're thinking to yourself that all this prosperity is too good to be true, then you'd be right. In 906,
it just goes to show that back then, democracy wasn't really... I mean, democracy is with the exception of the ancient Greeks, is a very modern concept in comparison with the history of the world. It's just like the default style of government for pretty much all of humanity was like tyranny or communism, or basically one person ruling. And I can see like there might be a basic human need for democracy, and that's why you get all of this pushback against all of these rulers and from the people, like these uprisings and stuff. And eventually we kind of figured it out, hundreds, thousands of years later with kind of a democracy style of government, which isn't perfect, but definitely preferable, I think, to this stuff.
China collapsed again due to the power of regional warlords. The Shang managed to control the southern part of China, but the north remained ruled by Chinese-influenced nomads. The Jurchens, a fringe tribe in modern-day Manchuria, rebelled against their nomad rulers and soon conquered all the way down to northern China. They proclaimed the Jin Dynasty and vied for power with the Song in the south. But as both kingdoms contended with each other, a new, powerful confederacy was brewing in the Mongolian steppes.
Okay. I was wondering when Mongolia was going to come into the picture. So it looks like China, he keeps referring to all of this as China, but it looks like it's just broken up into a bunch of different areas. Did China exist as a country back then? I guess is what I'm trying to get at. Or was it viewed more as just these separate kingdoms or whatever? How did people from the outside and the inside view China? Like, I don't know if he's calling it China just for our sake, or if it actually was China just broken up into a bunch of different, power structures at that point. But the Mongols, we're getting into that. I was interested in how that kind of came about.
The Mongols were initially a squabbling band of nomadic herdsmen. They had distant links to the Xiongnu of the past and made their home on the Eurasian steppe. Their culture was deeply steeped in tradition and a religion that tied them to their land. But this was all to change with one man named Temujin, who history remembers as Genghis Khan, a man who would reform the Mongols from within and unite them into a powerful confederacy bound by blood and honor, and create...
Okay. I've obviously heard of Genghis Khan. I've seen his statues around a lot. He's a really famous figure, kind of like Gandhi. So yeah, I'm gonna be interested. I don't know anything about him though.
The legal framework and exceptional social mobility. The Mongols under Genghis and his descendants founded the largest land empire in history and would have impacts on nearly every part of Asia and even Europe. The story is told brilliantly in Jack Weatherford's Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World. Weatherford even narrated the book himself, which is available at today's sponsor, Audible. Audible has an unmatched selection of audiobooks and other audio products. They have to rethink between your Amazon SUI more episodes. This is where we leave China today. Tune in next time for the next chapter, one that would bring both the Song and the Jin to their knees, when we cover the Mongols.
Alright, well, that's going to be interesting to get into Mongolia, Genghis Khan. I've heard of the Mongolian Empire, of course. So I think they were a huge empire. Don't know anything about it. So I'll be curious about how much they took over, who they took over. Did Genghis Khan basically take over all of China? Like, how did that work? So yeah, so the Mongols and China were kind of like two different cultures that warred with each other, I guess. Interesting. So I wonder how the Mongols were kind of pushed back into what we now know as Mongolia, and how similar are the cultures between Mongolia and China? Because I know then you have Russia on top of that, so are the Mongolians kind of like a European/Asian culture? Kind of a mix of the two, or are they more just Asian? I don't know. Yeah, this looks like the background, and this looks kind of like, I don't know, out in Utah or Wyoming or something somewhere. Do they have horses? Like, horses I know were, they're not indigenous to the United States, even though they're like, people think of horses when they think of like the Wild West and stuff now. But I know that they were brought over from other parts of the world. I guess from the Middle East, and I guess from Asia. I guess horses were originally Asian as well. Alright, well, I guess that'll do it. If there are more videos on China that I can watch, okay, we'll get to part 2 tomorrow. We'll do part 2 tomorrow. And again, looking forward to that. But if there are more videos that I can watch on China to help me kind of learn more about this is so cool to me. I love all of the names. I love all of the names in China. They just have like this really cool sound to them, and they look fun. So, yeah, I don't know. There's just something about it. I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's just something about the Asian cultures that's really appealing. So, looking forward to it. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Hopefully, come back for part 2. We'll learn more about China together. Thanks for watching, as always. I'm gonna go get some work done today. We'll see you tomorrow.